Jimmy Butler returns from his second suspension Monday night. How will he respond? We'll give you our prediction, plus we break down a possible trade that might include Bradley Beal coming to Miami on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every moment more and more exciting with FanDuel. And new customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Have a great show for you today. We had the latest on Jimmy Butler trade talks and a fake trade idea that I think could work for everybody. But first, Jimmy Butler's suspension is up, and he's expected to rejoin the Heat for Monday night's home game against the Orlando Magic. I want to offer a prediction about how this is going to play out. But before we do that, I just want to ask you, David, like, how would you handle this if you were the Heat, if you were Eric Spoelstra? Because they are expected to make him available coming back from this 2-game suspension. I think there's still questions about what Jimmy Butler's role will be. This was not a suspension that was just conduct detrimental to the team, right? We've heard things about him not following team rules, obviously keeping the team late and showing and not being on that flight to Milwaukee last week. And so this coaching staff, this front office, Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra, everybody else involved have to come together and figure out, okay, like this, until this trade materializes or until we have some kind of resolution to this, how are we going to handle this? How do you think they should handle it?
I don't think that they should play him, and I've been pretty adamant about that. I think it behooves no one in order for him to see any kind of time out there whatsoever. He's not at 100%. And I know that you could argue it. It's hard to quantify whether or not he's giving his full effort, but clearly he hasn't been. And I think ESPN's Bobby Marks tweeted out something late last week following that suspension, showing that the numbers back up the fact that Jimmy's shot attempts are down. His effort is reflective of that. And I think it's pretty clear that you're not going to get 100% of what Jimmy Butler can offer you as a player on that floor. And that being the case, well, what's the point of having him out there? Like, it serves no one. It hurts the Heat because there you are putting him out there and you're not letting the players continue to develop and build the kind of chemistry and camaraderie that they'll need to carry them through for the rest of the season, whatever the outcome might be. You and I have both talked about it last week. We were pretty clear on the chances of Miami making the playoffs are getting slimmer and slimmer with every passing day that this saga goes on. And so that being the case, at the very least, you want to continue to build for something. You want to put those players out there and have them continue to show what they can produce and how they can build something together, knowing that Jimmy's not going to be part of this team for much longer or as an active participant. And it doesn't help Jimmy to go out there because, again, I think he's limited his options to one team, the Phoenix Suns. He's not showcasing his skill set for anybody else, despite Memphis's interest or reported interest and things of that sort. I don't think there's any kind of benefit for him in going out there and saying, yeah, here's 50, 60% of what I can do. And it's still pretty decent, but it's not really that good. How is that going to help him? How is that going to help another trade partner go, I like the way he kind of just quietly quit on his team and isn't really giving 100%. Plus, there's always, and that's regardless of your effort of play, the risk of injury. That's not going to help him at any point in time either. So to me, I just see that. I would sit him, have him be as little a distraction as possible. He's not going to get talked to by the media afterwards because he's probably going to just vanish from the locker room. He's not going to play. You're not going to bring him out to the podium. I think it solves all these problems. I don't think anybody on that team is clamoring for the version of Jimmy that we've gotten since before his first suspension, after he returned from that first suspension, and what we might possibly get on Monday. Starting him seems like the most antithetical move towards building something for the future, and that's what you're building for. It's a future without Jimmy Butler, and the Heat and the front office and the coaching staff have to accept that.
I agree with you. Don't play him. Let him sit on the bench. You brought this up, and you have been on this. I thought you couldn't really do it, but now that he's been suspended twice, He's now suspended for 9 games this month. He's lost $3 million in salary. I think you're at the point now where this team, when he's on the court, they have to play around him. They quite literally, Jaime Jaquez Jr. having to dribble around him because he just parks himself in the dunker spot and everybody's got to kind of just deal with it. Not just that, and you don't really know what kind of Jimmy Butler you're getting. Is it going to be one of these possessions where he does care, or is it going to be 80% of the possessions where he doesn't care? And by the way, this whole Jimmy Butler to come out and say, don't ever question my effort, and people on social media defending him and saying he is don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. I know I don't even need Bobby. Bobby Marks' stats are great. I don't need that. I've been watching basketball for a long time. I know when guys aren't trying. I know when this guy in particular isn't trying because there's a very clear on and off switch with Jimmy Butler. And we've been watching it for 5.5 years now. I know when he's not trying. He wasn't trying in those games. You could give me the stats. You don't, whatever. He ain't trying. And if that's going to be the case, you can't risk the injury. I understand that too. But this team also needs to start winning games in a real way. And yes, an engaged Jimmy Butler is the exact kind of player that this team needs. An offensive advantage creator, all these things. But he's not going to give you that ever. It's not happening. And the Heat have realized that it's not happening either. Now, is there something, if they're not able to move him by February 6th, the trade deadline, then you kind of have to play him after that. But that's a different question for after February 6th. They could deal with it then. But for right now, it doesn't serve you because of the injury risk and because he's just been a negative he has been a negative on the court. He is not helping this team win. As limited as this team already is, he's made them worse when he's been out there because of this awkwardness. So clarity, I think, can help everybody involved.
Yeah.
And just being like, we're not going to play you. Now, the idea, do they bring him off the bench instead of starting him? I think that doesn't make any sense either. Right. You bring a player off the bench to maybe send a message of, hey, we need to get your effort up, and not like a star player like Jimmy, but generally speaking. But that ship has sailed, dude. The only reason he's not playing is because he's been a distraction when he's on the court. Right. He'll be a distraction whether or not he comes out for the starting lineup or if he comes in 6 minutes into the first quarter. It's going to be a distraction regardless. So I'm with you. Just let him sit on the bench. Let him sit on the bench. Let him leave the locker room early and do all these things. I would imagine the only reason that the Heat wouldn't do that is because they've had this whole kind of sticking their head in the sand kind of approach to this whole thing where they're like, what Jimmy Butler trade request? What are you even talking about? Eric Spoelstra not even using his name in these press conferences. The Heat spokespeople telling reporters Eric Spoelstra is not going to be answering questions about Jimmy Butler. They've been trying to avoid this whole thing. And so if you just don't play him, right, that obviously invites other questions. But I'm at the point now where, again, don't act like this isn't happening. The team president came out in 2 different statements and told us it was happening. This is happening. Acknowledge it and do the best possible option here, which is, I guess you get to sit on the bench, talk a little bit with Nikola Jovic, talk a little bit with Kevin Love, but that's about it.
There is no role for Jimmy Butler on this team. I don't care if it's Game 7 of the NBA Finals and somehow winds up stringing most playoff run in history. Play Jimmy Butler. It's not going to help. It doesn't matter. He's given up on this team. And to your point, for him to say, don't question my effort, come on. That's ludicrous. We know what Jimmy Butler is capable of at his best. And clearly we haven't seen that over the last few weeks, whether it was before the suspensions or even during. It's not going to happen. I don't care what happens with this team in the future. You cannot play Jimmy Butler. And doing so sends a message to the team that he's more important than they are. And you can't do that because he is no longer a part of this organization, and he won't be. And if it ends badly, it's already ending badly. It's not going to change anything.
There's no sense in playing him to try to get his trade value up. When you get an everybody knows what an engaged Jimmy Butler looks like. Everybody knows that. Nobody's going to be tuning into Jimmy Butler for the first time. This guy's pretty good. Best case scenario if he comes out and actually plays. It doesn't make any sense in terms of a prediction of what will actually happen here. I still think I hope I'm wrong, and I haven't done much reporting on this. I feel like they're just going to start him anyway and just keep doing this until February 6th. But I really hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
No, I don't see why we would be. I agree with you 100%. He came back of a 6-game road trip, suspended for the duration of that, and they were like, yeah, he's fine, he's back. And they just put him in there for 2 games at home and both losses, and it was so detrimental to the team. Like any kind of, again, chemistry or camaraderie or rhythm or pattern or sense of familiarity out the door. And as you
Mhm.
pointed out astutely, you have to bend to what Jimmy does because you're not sure. Is he going to drive or is he going to get to the rim and be like, no, I'm going to kick it to Nico in the corner for a 3? You don't know what you're going to get from him.
Yeah.
And that being the case, it doesn't help. But so they're going to
That
continue to
that
roll him out.
clarity, I think that clarity would be so helpful to this team, just knowing, okay, he's here, they're trying to work out on the trade. That's fine, but he's not out there on the
Address it.
court, and we could just
Address
figure it
it.
out, and we could
You
just
have
figure
to
it out,
believe that
so
they have. Like, I don't, I mean, again, no reporting here,
mm,
but you have to assume that Spo has mentioned this at some point. You cannot just pretend. You cannot whistle past the graveyard. You can't just put your hands to your ears and go, la, 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 la. It's not happening. No Jimmy
right,
Butler trade, la, la, la. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, you're not children on the playground. This is
right,
a whole different thing. These are people,
yeah.
coworkers, colleagues, friends in many cases. And this whole thing is hung over the team for far too long. And if you're not going to be able to pull off a trade, it doesn't matter. As far as this team is concerned, for all intents and purposes, Jimmy Butler is not really out there on the floor.
Winning games has to be the most important thing at this point, right? The
Mhm.
front office can handle the Jimmy Butler situation between now and the deadline. If winning games is the most important thing, and not the sort of pretending that this distraction isn't a distraction, then
Yeah.
Jimmy Butler, it's been made clear Jimmy Butler on the court is not helping this team. I really do think, and maybe it sounds crazy and people could disagree with this, but right now, Jimmy is not helping this team win. Take him off the court, provide some clarity, and I think this team will just play better, and hopefully it will lead to some more wins here. Early last week, it did seem like a trade was coming soon. We'll tell you why it hasn't and what's holding up a deal after this here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams. At least we know one of them so far as we're recording this. The second team is being determined. Endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, wow, that's the icing on the cake. So download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team is a free daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter, one stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shear, and Locked On fantasy basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. The Suns traded their 2031 pick to the Jazz for 3 first-round picks last Tuesday. Still no trade, David. We were anticipating right before that Portland Trailblazers game when that trade happened. We're like, is this going to happen soon? We got Jimmy Butler wearing Phoenix Suns colored shoes during that game. It felt like it was imminent, right? Were we premature to think that a trade was coming that soon?
No, because that's usually the first domino to fall, right? Usually when you see something like that, it's done, and we talked about it at the time, giving up that kind of significant asset in the trade and the draft pick is because you know you're pulling something off. Because you can't go, take backsies. You can't just call the Utah Jazz and say, sorry, we couldn't get Jimmy Butler, so we're going to want our good pick back in exchange for these 3 decent to, kind of okay picks. That being the case, I don't think we were being premature. I think they thought that something was going to move forward, but I think things have changed. I think you look at what the Milwaukee Bucks have been able to string together, and we're hearing reports that Chris Middleton has been told that he's not going to be traded. I don't know how realistic those are or not. At the same time, we're hearing that there have no interest in Bradley Beal. That seems pretty likely as well, given his salary and the fact that maybe they don't really need him, that they have enough on this team without Beal and what he's capable of producing. And so things are kind of falling apart pretty quickly. And I don't know how a trade gets consummated. At this point, we're really just stuck here, kind of waiting for something, one other domino to fall. And I don't know that it will, because a
Mhm.
lot has to happen just right in order for a deal like this to happen
Well,
with so many different teams.
that's interesting that you brought the Milwaukee Bucks up. I hadn't thought of that. So they've won 8 of their last 10 games. They're they're putting a good stretch together here.
Yeah.
You think that's what it was? You thought maybe Milwaukee pulled out here and said, you know what? We're kind of good. We kind of want to ride this out for another week or so and maybe reevaluate things right before the trade deadline. But we're winning, and we have no reason to swap Middleton out for Beal at this point. Like that, that's an interesting theory. I had not considered it. From what I understand, the Phoenix Suns believe that they can shop this framework, right? Where when it was just the 2031 pick, it was difficult to take a framework that included obviously them getting Jimmy Butler with the Miami Heat and the Heat getting some other things and shop that around the league. And now that they have the 3 first-round picks, they can kind of say, all right, like if you're going to be team A, team B, and team C, or team C, either way, we have some draft picks to spread the wealth around. So that's my understanding, at least, of where things are right now, is that the Phoenix Suns decided that in order to shop around a framework to the league, we needed 3 picks instead of 1. And now they have that framework. They have the Heat. We know it's the Phoenix Suns. And that's why you hear the reporting around this is, hey, this is going to involve potentially 4 or 5 teams, because I think there are frameworks that involve like a 4-team framework and a 5-team framework. And it's the Suns just trying to go to each front office in the league and be like, do you want to plug in here? Do you want to plug in there? And how can we work this together? And obviously there's so many moving parts, and that's why this has been so complicated and taking a long time. But I do think that this sort of puzzle piecing this all together and trying to figure out the things that all work and make everybody happy enough to make it work, that's what's taking so long here, right? I thought it was interesting also that we tweeted it out on our Locked On Heat Twitter poll. We said, Heat fans, would you be willing to take Bradley Beal and the 3 picks from Phoenix just to get the Jimmy Butler saga over with now? Surprisingly, 54% of our audience said yes. I at least found it surprising. What about you?
No, I do as well. Like, I think I understand what's behind it. This has just gone on too long. And I think when I say that they shouldn't play him, part of that is because there's frustration there, and I can see what the fans are feeling. Like, even just talking to fans casually, at random places, they don't want Butler on the team. They want to move on. You want to be able to have some sense of closure one way or the other. And so even if it means being stuck with the albatross of Bradley Beal's deal for the next 2.5 seasons, that's a heck of a risk, but I can understand why they feel that way. I personally disagree. I think you're stuck there. You're not only are you a mediocre team right now as it is, maybe even a bad team without Jimmy Butler, but if you take on Bradley Beal, how much better are they going to get? Like, we saw him at his peak when he was an all-star and he was with the Washington Wizards. They didn't get much done, and that was playing alongside another all-star in John Wall at the time. Bradley Beal at his very best is going to carry this team to anything. And yes, you can make the argument Tyler Hero is a good player. Bam Adebayo, still a good-ish player, although he's struggling to some degree. I don't know how much Beal would help this team. I don't know what his role would be. You're going to have to slide him at the point guard. That didn't work in Phoenix. It hasn't worked for Tyler to be the de facto point guard. You're not helping anything. You're not creating any kind of balance in terms of Miami's offense. Defensively, he's not great. He's always been problematic with that throughout his career, although I think it's been a little overstated earlier in his career. But I just don't see why you would want to take Bradley Beal on, even if that gets you the closure that you so desperately want. I would rather wait until the summer, to be honest with you, and see if you can pull off a better trade then.
The Heat need, when you're trading Jimmy Butler, the Heat are going to need a pathway to the next thing. And if you trade Jimmy Butler away, we know you're not getting a superstar back. You're not getting the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander back in the Paul George trade. Like, you're not getting that. We know that. That's not happening. Bradley Beal is very far from the all-star player that he once was. This is a guy who used to score 30 points per game. That was 5 years ago. It was half a decade ago. He ain't that player anymore. So, and if you do acquire him, that takes you out of essentially the free agency pool of 2026, which is Luka, Kevin Durant, De'Aaron Fox, Trae Young, Jaren Jackson Jr., like all these guys that we keep hearing about. And so, it's almost like, what's the point, right? Because if you're not getting the all-star back now, you're not getting the lottery ticket back in terms of a prospect or a draft pick, and then you're kind of you're taking yourself out of the only other avenue, which is free agency in 2026. And maybe the Heat could trade Bradley Beal by then, but Mark Bartelstein, his agent, has told every reporter who wants to bring him on record to say he's not going to waive the no trade clause. He can say, like, because that no trade clause can come with him and in any deal. And that's why Miami didn't trade him 2 years ago. And that's why
Yeah.
they wouldn't do it now, because even if they try to trade him 2 years from now when he's an expiring, he could be like, I love it in Miami. I'm not waiving my no trade clause. Sorry. And
If
so
the
you
Heat
just,
were willing to do that, they would have given Jimmy the extension.
right.
Rather the devil you know than the
That's
devil
true.
you don't. And at this
Exactly.
point in time, I think if it's like you're paying $60 million, well, we at least know what we're getting from Jimmy, and we have to deal with his headaches and everything else like that. But we're comfortable, we're used to it,
Mhm.
and we know we're probably going to get a playoff primetime performance. I don't think you know what you're getting in Bradley Beal, how committed he'll be, and where his
Oh, I
role is
think you
going to
know
be.
exactly what you're getting in Bradley Beal. A worse
And
player, just like
yeah,
a guy
yeah,
who's worth a fraction of the $50 million contract and an albatross with a no trade clause. I think I know exactly what you're getting with Bradley Beal, and it's not
yeah,
very helpful. I
yeah.
do think I came up with a fake trade that satisfies everybody's needs: the Miami Heat, the Phoenix Suns, and then the other two teams that I think could get involved here. We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Hmm.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show: like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. All right, I got a 4-team fake trade that I want to throw your
Okay.
way here.
All right, let's hear it.
It includes the Miami Heat, the Phoenix Suns, the Toronto Raptors, and the Chicago Bulls. The
Hmm.
Heat get Bruce Brown, Chris Boucher, Kelly Olynyk, and 2 of those first-round picks that Phoenix just acquired. The
Mhm.
Raptors get Zach LaVine. The Suns get Jimmy Butler and Patrick Williams from Chicago.
Mm.
And then the Bulls get Bradley Beal, Yusuf Nurkic from Phoenix. They get a 2025 second-round pick. They get a 2026 first-round pick. Those come over from Toronto, and then they get one of those Phoenix first-round picks also. So they're going to get 2 first-round picks and a really good second-round pick. That one that comes over from Toronto is this year from Portland. So that's probably going to be a top 35 pick in the draft, which is very valuable. They also, so from the Bulls' perspective, why do they do this? Because they do part with Zach LaVine, but for swapping in Beal for LaVine, they're getting 4 very good picks here. 3 good picks here. And they're getting off of that Patrick Williams contract, which is not aging very well. It was like, it's a 5-year deal, $18 million a year. He's in the first year of that. Yusuf Nurkic, not awesome, out of the rotation in Phoenix, but his contract expires after next season. So they're getting off of like $60 million in long-term money, which I think would obviously be helpful if you're Chicago and you're rebuilding here. So you get that. If you're the Raptors, you get Zach LaVine, and you saw Michael Grange, who covers the Raptors up there in Toronto, reporting late last week that they are looking for the next significant piece next to Scotty Barnes. And if you think about the kind of player that would fit next to Barnes, LaVine's it, right? Lights out shooter, offensive kind of guy, ball handles a little bit and stuff like that. Like that to me is the kind of thing that you need next to Scotty Barnes. So you get him in Toronto. He's under contract for another 3 years. So, you're not risking him walking away in free agency. And if you're Toronto, you know how important that is for them. The Suns get their guys and Jimmy Butler. They get Patrick Williams, who I think, good body to have in that front court rotation. They need more, bodies in that spot. So that would be helpful for them. And then for Miami's part, you get Bruce Brown on an expiring, Chris Boucher on an expiring. You're reunited with Kelly Olynyk, whose deal expires after next year. So you're still keeping yourself in the mix for 2026 there. And you get 2 first-round picks. I think, tell me who says no to this?
I tend to think Toronto wouldn't be interested in this deal because taking on LaVine and that kind of money just doesn't seem like the kind of move that we've seen Masai Ujiri make in the past. But you're not luring any free agents, and you can still kind of compete immediately. I don't know if that's the right process. I don't know. It seems like that would be the shakiest
I
component
agree
here,
with
is
you.
trying to get
That would be
Toronto
the
to
thing.
buy in there. Yeah.
Are they in on LaVine enough where they think this is worth getting involved here? Would they need, if you're Miami, would you say, you know what?
Give
This
them a
kind of
pick.
sucks, but we'll give you one of those picks, and that might be sweetening the deal for Toronto a little bit. Like you get LaVine and one of those Phoenix picks, maybe then.
If that's the case, if that's the case, even from the Heat perspective, I'd still do it. Like if it's just
Oh
one
yeah,
pick and you can move on and you can still get that cap flexibility, yeah, and you get Olynyk for a couple of years, yeah, fine, that's great. I mean, you're probably
and you
gonna have
get.
to trade Kevin Love too. I don't know. I mean, but I think it
I
would
don't
work
think
either
you would
way.
have to. You might have to trade somebody, whether it's Kevin Love, Josh Richardson, Alec Burks, just to get back to 15 players. You'd probably have to do that here, but
Yeah.
well, I think they'd also get Bruce Brown in this deal, which would be helpful. this
in the
Bruce
short
Brown
term.
is the Heat like Bruce Brown. I think that they would be really interested in acquiring him, not just because of he's got a $23 million expiring salary, which makes getting all the money to work a lot easier. They like Bruce Brown as the basketball player, and we know that if you're trading Jimmy Butler before February 6th, they still need good role players to help them make this push. And watching this team, it's just like, look, I like Pelle Larsson fine. I like a lot of these guys fine. It is clear that this team needs a couple other like high-level role players to make this
Yeah.
push. Bruce Brown is that. Kelly Olynyk is that. Chris Boucher's having a great – he's shooting lights out from three-point range this year for Toronto. He could help them in the front court too. So these are helpful players. And then with Boucher, you'd have his bird rights, so you could bring him back if you wanted to. And Olynyk, he's under contract next year. You can figure that out. And then Bruce Brown, I think he'd have his early bird rights, so I'm not sure if you'd be able to bring him back. But he would be helpful for this team in the short term, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like it. It feels like that kind of deal that we've talked about before, where everybody feels like they're kind of getting screwed a little bit and not necessarily feel like, oh, this is the greatest deal in the world. You know, I guess from the Suns' perspective, they're getting the two players they want, but they have to give up, a lot of draft capital in order to do so. But that's going to be a requirement anyway. So it feels like this is a very realistic framework for a deal that I could see play out, because it gets all the teams involved. You get a little bit of something. You're not really benefiting to a huge degree, but it's all about kind of moving things around to try and alleviate, whether it's cap space or to get a more familiar name, like to reunite Bradley Beal with his college coach and Billy Donovan. I think that's overstating things a little bit.
But it
I
could
don't
help him
think
waive his no trade clause, Like he's like, hey, it's one thing to try to send Bradley Beal to Milwaukee or Toronto. Players
Right.
tend to like playing in Chicago.
It's Chicago. Yeah, it's Chicago. You're playing for Billy. I could see that. I
Play
think
with
that's much more
Lonzo,
realistic.
like that's a fun team. He's like, yeah, we're fast paced. We score a lot of points. Like, yeah, why not? Getting paid $50 million a year, live in Chicago, be back with my college coach, and I'm scoring 120. I'm on a team that scores 120 points a night. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely more palatable for a player like Beal. So yeah, I could see it. Have you put this out there on the timeline and see what the fan
I did.
response is?
I put it out on the timeline. I also did a short. I recorded a short for our social media channels here on Locked On Heat. So it's out there, and people have been able to kind of respond to it over the last couple of days. But I wanted to throw it your way also. Yeah, I don't. I think the Bulls could be a little shaky here too. Like if they don't want Bradley Beal's no trade clause, I'd understand why they're maybe a little queasy about it. But that's why I included that Patrick Williams for Yusuf Nurkic bit. And this would have to be done in two separate trades under league rules, but it's very simple to like Nurkic for Williams. That would just happen as a separate trade. And with understanding that all this other stuff is going to happen. But that helps, I think, Chicago, because that Patrick Williams contract is not good.
What's the feedback been like so far? Like, I mean, from fans around the league? Like, I would assume that almost every fan base for these four teams, with the exception of the Suns, would be like, why would I do this? Why would they do this?
Well, I
But
brought
it's
it up
not.
to Sean Woodley, who hosts Locked On Raptors, and he didn't hate it, but he was sort of similar to you. He's like, "Is this the move that Toronto makes? There's no need to do this before the deadline. They could do this, they can try to. There's no need to rush into it. They can afford to be patient." But my thing always was like, who are you getting better than Zach LaVine if you're the Raptors?
Yeah.
And I think LaVine's a good player. He's not so good that he's going to take you off the tanking track right now. Like this team obviously wants to go maybe get Cooper Flag or something like that. He's not good enough to take you off of that, but he's still good enough where next year you add, another piece, a high level rookie, maybe another veteran, you add him to the rotation. You got Scotty Barnes, you got Zach LaVine for a full year. You can kind of make a little bit of a Pistons type of leap back into the play-in mix next year. So yeah, I'm looking at the comments right now. Most people are like, it makes sense for Miami and Phoenix, but not everybody else. I don't know. These are
tough sell.
People on Twitter.
It's a tough sell. It's a tough
sell.
sell.
I like it a lot. I don't know. I was trying to figure out another deal to get Milwaukee or Memphis involved. We've seen them in the mix. The Memphis bit is hard here. I know that they like the idea of acquiring Jimmy Butler as like a Kawhi Leonard style rental where, hey, maybe he can take us over the top this year. We get playoff Jimmy. He's one of the best 5 players on the planet during the postseason. We kind of catch lightning in a bottle, and then we let him walk away if he wants, or he opts into $52 million and then he walks away after next season. I think Memphis would be okay with that too, right? I don't think that my guess here is that Jimmy Butler doesn't have a problem playing in Memphis necessarily. I just think that he knows that the Grizzlies don't have any interest in signing him to a long-term extension, and that Memphis, in doing this, could be trying to get off of this Marcus Smart contract, which isn't great. Maybe they would be trying to get off of Desmond Bane's long-term deal. It's like sneakily not an awesome contract. I don't know if that's something Miami would want, but maybe that's why you get these other teams involved. Like, does Bane go to Memphis or I'm sorry, Toronto, and then Bruce Brown comes over from there? Like, Bane makes sense to me in Toronto, right? Like something like that. So other, if this trade was out there and everybody liked it, maybe it would already be done already. But the other part here that I don't know that's been covered enough is we have until February 6th. There's no team outside of Miami that feels any urgency to do anything right now. Even Phoenix, I mean, they probably have a little bit more urgency because you want to get Jimmy in there as soon as possible because they need to start winning games in the Western Conference. But like if you're these other teams that are involved, Toronto, Chicago, whatever, there's no need. You just wait. You can wait until the deadline here. There's no need to do this stuff early. And so I think that's maybe another thing that's sort of holding things up here is you've got Miami and you've got Phoenix that are ready to pull a trigger on something, but you have all these other teams kind of being like, you know what, let's wait and see. No rush. We can kind of get something done over the next, the last couple of days before the trade deadline. But that'll do it for us today. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you're going to have to sweeten the deal up for those teams to get involved because, again, without that sense of urgency, it could feel like just moving deck chairs and it wouldn't really benefit them to the kind of degree where they feel like they actually have to be involved in this kind of deal. They're not getting anything. Miami's getting rid of Jimmy so that he's no longer a distraction. Phoenix is getting the player that they desperately want or are willing to re-sign, but everybody else is kind of just saying, you know what, I don't know, maybe for this we might as well just keep our guys rather than necessarily get involved and not
or just or you're orchestrating your leverage. You're like, the deal sounds good, but if you make it a little bit better, we could do it before the trade deadline. This is how it's cutthroat, man, with these front offices. They're always trying to be the winner in all these deals. The Heat host the Orlando Magic tonight. We'll be back with our post-game reactions. For now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.